switch this one here. So my story is about our integration with the CDN, and it's a little bit of a play. It kind of became a meme for us. Trying to find, yeah. So I hang this poster on my wall after a few weeks of our guys basically coming to us every time and saying, okay, yeah, this time I'm 99% sure this is CDN, right? And after a few weeks, I was just like, yeah, you know what? Talk to the wall. It never turned out to be CDN's fault. And that made me realize that people have a lot of kind of preconceptions and a lot of there is a lot of misunderstanding about what CDN does and how can we handle it so that it's so that the solution is really serving us, and how to be a good citizen in an environment where we use a CDN. So first, a little bit about the project. Oh, that's great. So that stopped working. Or not. Let's see. Right, we are on Sitecore 10.2 in managed cloud. Our solution is we have a headless solution built on Vue.js. Prior to CDN, we had one content management and 10 CD servers. It's not a small solution. It's got 2,000 websites, right? Some of them manage automatically, a lot of them manage manually, a large editing team, large number of people working on it all together. On top of it, we have a content hosting solution where content is being authored and sifted from the sites to the mobile app. Well, at some point we'll start struggling with performance, right? As you will, basically being scaling up to a large solution like this. So we started with an Akamai just hosting assets, such as JavaScript, CSS. Images are being served from Content Hub, so that's kind of pre-cached for us. No problem there. One thing that was a little bit of a complication was that we are in integrated mode. It is what it is. We're working on changing it into headless mode, so that's a work in progress. And we started, thinking about, okay, what can we do? Like, adding more and more servers is just not really a good idea if you kind of, have a fixed budget, right? So we had to be smarter. Well, we did cache JSS, JavaScript. We cached styles. We had images, and we looked into what really eats into our CPU cycles and what can we do to save that expense, right? So basically, other classes of things that we can cache are, like API calls for things that, search services that are being generated, the search results that are being generated for, let's say, known parameters, you can cache that. And of course, pages, right? Both pages as pre-generated, so server-side rendered HTML and the layout service output. And then there are the uncacheables. From Sitecore's perspective, I mean, you're not going to be able to cache pages that are personalized based on user profile, right? Because everyone needs to get their own version. That's the whole idea. So our goals, as goals for any CDN solution, would be faster response, of course, and by the extension of that is better user experience, but also what flows from this is that actually impacts your Google score, how high you are. So your SEO positioning depends on how quickly Google can get to your page, right? So it is a business benefit other than, of course, bandwidth and server costs, right? So we started with 10 servers. We had very ambitious plans where I'm going to talk about where we got, but overall we improved the bandwidth and CPU usage. We lowered the usage and basically got rid of our scaling issues, and by extension our availability and resilience shot up. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, acceleration of API performance. I'm going to be talking a little bit about API caching. That's actually a very interesting case, but it depends on your API, right? How you call it and what you can actually whether you can actually get much from CDN from it. So for every cache, the biggest problem is cache eviction, right? Like they are saying that there are only two hard things in computer science, right? Cache invalidation and naming things, right? So CDN is just a big cache, right? So in general, in CDN, you have a few strategies for population and invalidation of cache. You have tag or event-based, which would be, I'm going to flash it when I publish a new page, right? I'm going to clean the CDN. Or you can just do time-based invalidation, which you're saying, cache this for 10 minutes, right? We employ both, depending on, like, it's kind of belt and suspender situation. We wanted to make sure that we can always evict anything from cache when there is a need, but we also wanted to be able to not have to populate everything by our own, and to be able to basically regenerate things as new content is appearing, but without the need to immediately generate it. So for this, CDNs have very cool mechanism. There is a simple, it's very cool because it is very simple. We have a cache control that is actually RFC mandated, so a lot of it is just part of the spec. So whether you have, I mean, the 0.0 to enable the caching is to switch it from no cache that Sidecar automatically gives you, where nothing can be cached anywhere. Another version of that is private and public. Private says that only browser can cache it, and public says anything in between can cache that asset. And then there are stages of the life cycle of an asset. So first, we've got a max age, which is how long the asset stays fresh in the CDN. The fresh means it will just go from the CDN no matter what, and that's the kind of the bulk of the job. Those numbers are in seconds, so 600 seconds means it's 10 minutes, right? Then, when CDNs have this stale while revalidate, so keep serving the old asset until we will serve you a new one. So CDN tries to get a new asset, but in the meantime, all the barrage of users are still getting something, right? So we're getting one request, give me this new page, but everyone else is still being served something, right? And then on top of that, stale if error is really a brilliant thing for resilience, because it basically says, if your server goes down, if your server throws a 500, right? You like just give the users whatever you have for another day, right? So, you know, that basically caused that our resilience to shoot up pretty dramatically. That is going to be different depending on the asset that you're serving. You're going to want to have a different cache for a blog that will never change, right? You can just set it to a day or a year, and you can have a different value for your homepage, right? Which is very dynamic and it's going to be changing quite a lot, right? So we gave the ability to the users to set whether they want cache, what is the time, and for most pages we just set it to 2 hours. They are happy with it, and it's basically it's not changing that often. But if it did, we also gave them solution for that, which I'm going to show you in a moment, right? And then, you know, the rest of it, how long it can stale the old version if it's while it's revalidating, and if the server ever went down, right? And also we have so we're using personalization a lot for parameterization. Basically, if the same content is being served on different websites, then pick a different data source, right? Because we have some of the content being automated in a way that you're not going to be editing each and every one of those 2,000 websites, right? So personalization should always run, but the question is that personalization always the same per always the same per the same URL? If that's okay, that's not a problem, right? Then CDN can still do its job. But if a CDN needs to be different from request, if a page needs to be different from request to request, basically you have this checkbox to disable caching, and you kind of get the worst case scenario, which is what we had before CDN. So, you know, oh well. And then there is the invalidation that is there's kind of, we went part way. We're evaluating, and we're going to be going deeper if there is a need. But so far, the time-based invalidation worked for us. So, you know, if it's going to be needed, we can always say cache everything for a year, but we are tagging the content based on which site it's on, which brand it represents, which part of Sitecore tree it is, because some pages can exist under different places, so we can just tag it with the item path and just evict that item path. So you can basically tag it by a particular tag name, separated by commas, and then you can flash the tags. For example, we have an up version. So we have an up version 10. When we do a deployment, we have an up version 10.1.11. We just flash the 10 version and get all of the pages regenerated on up version 11, right? So we have kind of the best of both worlds. I mean, it will expire anyway, but for things that are cached for a day or a week, we can just flash it anyway, right? We had a situation where one of the servers went completely berserk, right? Just like started generating crazy content. So we can just say, for that particular server, just flash everything that that server generated, right? That happened once, but I mean, it doesn't cost us anything to serve that. And then we have this, you can see local, because that tag was from my machine, but we have different environments, right? We have QA, dev, stage, and live, right? And local is my developer machine. So that also we can just flash everything that is in stage, or flash everything that is on a live server, right? That's a nuclear option, but there it is. So I only did a brief investigation. I mean, in Akamai there is edge cache tag. In Cloudflare there is a cache tag, and we just spoke. The Varnish even has has content tagging. So in general, your CDN provider should also have this. And to facilitate that, I mean, at some point we probably will add this to a publish, right? But I mean, you've done Sitecore deployment, so you know that, okay, I don't have to publish a page, but what if the data source changes, right? Like, this is not just if I publish this page, because the page can change, never being published by itself, right? So this is never super easy to understand when I should flash after when I publish something, right? So we're not doing that automatically yet. Maybe someday, maybe AI, I don't know. But right now it's we give you, as an author, basically an environment, like a solution where if you find that you published something and that content is not appearing as you would expect it, you just go to invalidate in CDN, and you can say invalidate content path, and that will flash this page on every website, right? Based on the content tagging. So for this, this is actually a piece of code. This is the first piece of code that we had to write that was Akamai specific. Everything that we talked so far, well, other than the name of that header, right, is just general CDN, and it's part of the spec, right? When it comes to flashing, well, every CDN is going to have their own API. Akamai is actually quite nice. They have a project that is on GitHub, and they also have NuGet. It's a very old project. They haven't touched it for, I don't know, 10 years. I mean, old code, but it's just when you get NuGet, you don't have to look at the code, right? So you just get the NuGet, and you get the authorization tokens, and you basically can say, flash me this URL, flash me this tag, right? It's like the most complex thing about this solution was to build this UI, really, right? Other than this is just a trivial thing. So that's pages, and we can influence that. Now, APIs are somewhat different, right? You don't have page for an API, you don't have place in content to edit this, but APIs are controlled by developer, and APIs can be tagged by developers. And for this purpose, we've built, well, since most of the APIs, both in Sitecore and in our code, are just either HTML actions or MVC action controllers. MVC controller actions. We've basically built an attribute with all of this stuff, the good stuff that we talked before. So cacheability, private, public, no cache, there's additional no store, and then on an API, you just tag it with an attribute and just say, okay, make it a public, so make it available for CDN, cache it just for 1 minute. We kind of wanted to stay on the safe side. If we're not responding quickly enough, just serve it for two more minutes, and then if we crashed, make sure that it's still there for 2 more hours, right? It's not like we necessarily are getting crashes, but it's better safe than sorry. So then, up till then, I kind of thought that, okay, well, there are controllers and actions, and that's basically it. But I've actually learned when I was investigating JSS that actually there are HTTP actions and there are MVC controller actions. So, and they are, for some reason, they are different. Yeah, it's what it is, and the problem is that the JSS dictionary, which we also wanted to cache, was an HTTP action other than the rest of the solution, and adding an action to an existing API. I'm not going to decompile every Sitecore class or controller, add my attribute, and then compile it again. That would be crazy for maintenance and upgrade reasons. Luckily, .NET itself has a great mechanism for that. So all of the filters that are implemented in an action, and those headers are added in filters, action filters. All of the filters that are provided, you can provide filters from a config file, you can provide them from an attribute, and there is one other way. So I think it was okay. So there needs to be a way to hack into it, right? Not the easiest way to find, but it is doable. You basically plug into, you create your own filter provider, and basically in that filter provider you're saying that, hey, if a controller is dictionary service controller, the JSS service controller, just provide this filter on top of what is there, right? So that's basically an equivalent of me going in there and just adding this attribute on JSS. And then how do you plug that provider in? Basically in your initialized pipeline, when Sitecore starts, you just go into the services and attach your file filter provider to the rest of the providers available in the .NET platform. You can do the same for both HTTP actions and an MVC controller actions. So there are a few things that we had to implement. That wasn't CDN's fault, again, but that was a thing that was that needed to be modified so so that we can enable CDN fully. So Sitecore forms, when they are being sent to you, you get one token as a header, and then another token you get rendered into the page. And then when you send the response, you send both tokens, and Sitecore is, looking, is that the same thing, or, are you cheating, right? Are you a robot, or are you legit? So similarly to adding filters, we can just say, hey, you know what? When we see the filters flow through the providers, when we find the filter that actually for that provider, replace it with our own, and in the providers just basically just do the plug in our own custom XSRF provider filter, so that Sitecore doesn't get in our way of implementing CDN. And in that filter, you basically say, okay, well, when we validate, we provide our own implementation of that validation that is not based on a cookie plus the stuff that is generated from the CDN. That is potentially one thing that you need to think if you have Sitecore forms. Then there is another thing that we ran into, and we ran into it actually after we deployed it. When at some point we noticed that some of the forms are not being saved into the database. What the heck? And that was like the investigation wasn't really like that intuitive, because some of them still got saved, right? So what we've noticed is that whenever we have a cookie consent screen, and when you consent to the cookie, our JSS tracker starts sending the push request that punch through CDN and log your journey, right? So that we can serve you better content. But if you didn't consent to our XP cookie, the tracker never does the push request, and therefore you never touch Sitecore. Never. You always and only talk to CDN, right? So the users who accepted the cookie, the accepted cookies are using the JSS tracker, and that JSS tracker is getting the appropriate cookie, and then form send is the first request that touches Sitecore. And at that point, ASP.NET is creating a session ID, but that session, it has a clever thing, like property, is that a fresh session? Like, is that a first request for that session? And Forms is checking that. And Forms were basically saying, if that is the first request, you're probably a robot. We're not letting you save the request, right? Well, we had to disable that, right? We had to provide our own solution to protect the forms, but we couldn't, we had to enable you to send forms on your first request, right? And obviously, since you're, like I said, we may never ever talk to you potentially unless you consent, but when you consent, no gets are actually reaching the origin, everything goes through the CDN. So Sitecore has a solution for that. There is a universal tracker and JSS tracker, which basically does a push request. CDN does not cache push requests, only get requests, right? So that push request, basically every time you travel on every point of your journey, you're saying, I'm on this page, I'm on this page, I'm on that page, right? And it basically only that gets logged, but you don't generate a new page for every user, right? So that needs to be implemented in your front end app, right? So basically your JavaScript needs to notify Sitecore that it landed on a new page. And then other things that we had to consider. I got very excited when I was just like, oh my god, like the numbers were amazing, right? When I started, like I'm doing my benchmarks, and it's just like, the more clients I throw at it, the faster it is, right? And it's just like scaling infinitely, right? The problem is that, well, it will depend on your CDN, right? If you have, Akamai is built in a way that it has multiple edge servers thrown around the world, basically at different ISP providers. You have the edge servers, and those edge servers, like all the local users are reaching those edge servers, but those edge servers, you can still have a couple of dozens of edge servers, right? So you're not going to be asked once for a page. That page will still be generated as many as, let's say, number of cities that you're being asked from, right? So it still can be, 20, 50, 100, depending on how geographically dispersed you're going to be. So we cut our traffic by over a half, and we solved the resiliency and availability and all the other good stuff. But still, like my first thing is just going to be, oh my God, we're just going to have 2 servers because one would not be politically correct, because what if it fails, right? No, we still need a few servers. We're working on optimizing it differently, but and also there is another way to deal with it. I have a proof of concept of output caching, but the ideal solution, and Akamai has something like this, is when you have 2-tier caching. When you have basically the first tier that is just around your server, and then all the other edges are hitting that second tier, right? Unfortunately, you can have this, or you can have some security things. They are not just basically, there are 2 features in Akamai that are not compatible. Of course, security wins. We need to deal with our problems other ways. It helped, but it didn't eliminate everything completely, right? But we still have things that we can do, right? We can just elongate the cache and just deal with publishing, other things that we can do. Yeah, think about whether you want to push or just on-demand populate. For us, on-demand seems much easier and much better solution, because basically we don't have to push everything whenever something is changed. We don't have to push everything, and it gets kind of averaged over time, right? As people view new pages and new pages are being generated. But if you push it, and if you kind of at least invalidate on your own, like, you could really increase the cache time. So, it's a balance. The on-publish invalidation is, like I said, it's a potentially complex problem. Because think about it, when you are publishing a page, it probably has a navigation, and you're republishing that page because that page changed, but someone changed the name that page has in the navigation. Like, you would have to regenerate all of those pages, right? Unless we did some, partial. I mean, there are edge tags, things like that, but I'm just saying that partial and automatic invalidation is not a simple problem, right? It's that's why we went with time-based caching, and yeah, performance testing is an interesting thing. One thing you need to know, like if you after this. Like from time to time we just do testing of the solution, but you don't want to test CDN, right? That doesn't make any sense. You want to test your origins. So CDN, you can either whitelist or blacklist parameters, but if you if you just blacklist some parameters, you can just say version 1, version 2, version 3, or locale 1, locale 2, locale 3, or basically if you add a parameter, CDN will generally generate another, like will ask origin for a version of that page for those new parameters, right? That's why unless you have your parameters whitelisted, CDN is not necessarily on its own like a DDoS protection, right? Because you can always just ask for that page with different parameters, right? If you really want to hurt a solution. So, and also it doesn't, the consideration is not really valid for push or other verbs. For HTML, it's just, CDN is just working for gets, right? But that's basically it. I mean, for now, I've replaced the poster, and that's the question. If it's a CDN's, is a CDN at fault? It's more mystical to people than it really is complicated. So, do you guys have questions?
Do you have any questions?